In this video, we will be learning how to solve problems involving the relative sizes of two quantities where missing values can be found by using integer multiplication and division facts. This learning objective is split into 3 separate activities. For activity 1, we're first going to learn about ratios versus fractions, and then we're going to do an activity where we fill in some missing values. Our second activity is going to be solving some ratio word problems. And our third activity is going to be looking at ratio and recipes. Let's first explore the difference between writing something as a fraction and writing something as a ratio. You have 2 activities on your worksheet where you need to change the fraction to a ratio. Let's work through an example together to learn the skill. Let's look at this scenario. I have a group of people. 1/4 of my group are boys. So what fraction would be girls if 1/4 were boys? So we could say that if 1/4 were boys, then 3/4 would be girls. But how would I write that as a ratio of boys to girls? So as long as my denominators are the same in both fractions, I can simply write my numerator. What this is telling me is that for every 1 boy, there are 3 girls. And if I was to add up my total of boys and girls, I can see that I have 4. Now this fraction tells me 1 out of every 4 people is a boy. This fraction tells me 3 out of every 4 people is a girl. Writing it as a ratio is simply telling me that for every 1 boy, there are 3 girls. This does not necessarily mean that in my group there is 1 boy and 3 girls. There could be 10 boys and 30 girls. Just like the fraction, if a quarter of the group are boys, we don't know how many are boys because we don't know how many people there are altogether. But we know 1/4 of any size group is a boy in this scenario. And in this scenario, 3/4 of any amount of people are girls in this scenario. To write it as a ratio, I'm simply writing that every 1 boy we have, there will be 3 girls. Let's have a go at looking at another scenario. In this group, 3 out of 5 are girls. So if 3/5 are girls, what fraction would be boys? If 3 out of the 5 are girls, then 2 out of the 5 are boys. And if I was to write this as a ratio, because I can compare these as they have the same denominator, I can simply write the numerator. For every 2 boys, there are 3 girls. And if I was to add that up, my 2 and my 3 comes to a total of 5. 3 out of 5 are girls, 3/5. 2 out of the 5 are boys, 2/5. But with ratio, we write one amount compared to another. For every 2 boys, there are 3 girls. Let's take a look here. If 4/10 are boys, that means 4 out of 10 in a group are boys. Then 6 out of 10 would be the girls. The denominators are the same, so I can represent these fractions as a ratio now. For every 4 boys, there will be 6 girls. And if I was to add these up, I can see in a group of 10, if I had 4 boys, I would have 6 girls, which is the same as this. Now, what I could also do with this ratio, like I could do with these fractions, is to simplify them. I can simplify them all in the same way. So my boys, if I was to simplify this fraction, they're both even numbers, so I could make this 2/5. That is a simplified version of 4/10. And for my girls, they're both even numbers, so I could simplify by halving both my numerator and denominator. 3/5. Okay, so I could also say, as these have the same denominator, that this ratio could also be 2 to 3. You can also see in my ratio here that all I've done is halved each side. So ratios can be simplified in the same way that fractions can be simplified. So have a go on your worksheet at changing the fractions to ratios, and can you see how any of the ratios could be simplified? In the next activity, we're looking at ratios and then finding equivalent ratios, very similar to finding equivalent fractions. So here we have a table where the heading is our first ratio. So in a ratio of 4 to 6, we need to fill out equivalent ratios where you're given one side and not the other. Okay, so what we're doing is we're finding scale factors each time. So I'm always going to start from my original, and I have these two to compare. I need to think about the scale factor. What did I scale up by from 6 to 24? Well, I multiplied by 4. I'm using my times table knowledge. So I then need to do the same thing to this side. Whatever I scale up one side, I must scale to all the parts. 4 times 4 is 16. So I have my first ratio, my first equivalent ratio. In this line, I'm given this information, so I'm going to compare these two. What did I scale up by? Using my times table knowledge, I know that I had to multiply by 8, so I need to then multiply this side by 8, which is 48. Moving on to the next one. I've got this information, so I can compare these two. What did I multiply by? What's my scale factor? It's 9, so I need to do the same this side. 4 times 9 is 36. And finally, I have these to compare. What did I scale 4 up by to get to 48? I had to multiply by 12, which means I do the same to the other side. And 6 times 12 is 72. And that's how you start from one ratio and scale your way all the way up to find lots of equivalent ratios. All of these ratios are the same. Very similar to finding equivalent fractions. For our next activity, we're going to work through some sentences, picking out the clues and deciding how we can apply the ratio to it. Let's have a go at one together, which isn't on your worksheet, just so that we can learn this. Okay, let's have a look at how to solve one of these styles of questions. I'm going to start by getting my highlighter ready. The ratio of black to white in a tin of grey paint is 6 to 4, so that's important information. How many millilitres of black paint are in a 1 litre tin of grey paint? How many millilitres of white paint is in 1800 millilitres of black paint? And finally, a batch of grey paint contains 6 litres of white paint. How much grey paint is there? Okay, so we've got a few different questions and you may be wondering how to begin. So we're going to start by picking out information we know. Now I'm first going to write black to white, and then I'm going to write underneath my ratio. The ratio of black to white is 6 to 4. Now that is the starting point of solving these problems. So with all your problems, label the things that are in a ratio and label the amounts. And then the second thing I want you to do is to add up what these parts are. Okay, so for black we have 6 out of 10, and for white we have 4 out of 10. So there's 4 tenths white in my grey paint and 6 tenths black in my grey paint. For every 6 millilitres or litres of black, there will be 4 millilitres or litres of white. The ratio is comparing one thing to another. Okay? Now let's look at our first question. How many millilitres of black paint are in a 1 litre tin of grey paint? Now have a think about this. 1 litre tin of grey paint. The grey paint is neither the black or the white. The grey paint is the combination of the two. So I'm going to write above here, grey, G for grey. This is going to represent my grey paint. This is going to represent the black and the white combined. So if I had 6, let's say for example these units are millilitres. If I have 6 millilitres of black and 4 millilitres of white, I will have altogether 10 millilitres of grey. Or if I had 6 litres of black, 4 litres of white, I would have 10 litres of grey, because these are both mixed together in the same tin. How many millilitres of black paint are in a 1 litre tin of grey paint? So we're going to imagine that these units here are all millilitres. So we want to go up to a 1 litre tin of paint. Now 1 litre is equal to 1,000 millilitres. Let's work through a style of question similar to the one on your worksheet. I'm going to get my highlighter so I can start to highlight important information. The ratio of black to white in a tin of grey paint is 6:4. Okay, with your questions, first of all, take that first statement and take note of the ratio. I'm not going to read each question out now because we're going to go through them individually. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a note of my black to white ratio, which is 6:4. And I'm also going to total the different parts of it up. So my black, I have 6 parts out of 10, 6/10. And my white, I have 4 parts out of 10, 4/10. For every 6 parts of black, I have 4 parts of white. For every 4 parts of white, I have 6 parts of black. Now, using ratio helps manufacturers of paint to make sure that their shade of grey is the same, whether they're making a very small sample pot or whether they're making a big 10-litre pot of paint. If they didn't maintain their ratios, the shades of grey would be different, as altering the amount of white in a grey paint would change the shade. If I put too much white in, the shade of grey would be too light. If I put too much in, it would be too dark. So ratio is a very important thing that is used in real life a lot. Okay, let's start to look through the questions. After you've written down your items in the ratio and the actual ratio, 6:4 equals 10, I'm also going to write here a G, because my black and my white equals my grey paint. Okay, so my G is just going to stand for my grey paint. If I had 6 millilitres of black and 4 millilitres of white, well, that would add up to 10 millilitres of paint, and it would be 10 millilitres of my grey paint. Now, once you've done this, this is going to help you with each of your questions. Let's start with the first question. How many millilitres of black paint are there? So I'm going to put a question. How many millilitres of black paint is in a 1 litre tin of grey paint? Okay. So I could write this. This is what I want to know. How much black in a 1 litre tin of grey paint? Now my question asks me for millilitres. So I can't answer millilitres if this is in litres. So I'm going to need to convert this to millilitres. Now in 1 litre, there is 1,000 millilitres. Okay. Now I have 2 things I can compare. I can compare this to this. I can compare my 10 to my 1,000. If you have watched the scale factor video, you might have an idea how to do this. This is very similar to what we do with fractions when finding equivalent fractions. What I'm going to do to maintain this ratio, I need to make sure that whatever I scale this up by, I scale these up by 2. So I need to think about how I scale 10 up to get to 1,000. What do I multiply it by? Well, 10 multiplies by 100 to get to 1,000. So I need to multiply both of these by 100, 2. So if 6 millilitres of black and 4 millilitres of white made 10 millilitres of grey, then 600 millilitres of black and 400 millilitres of white would make 1000 millilitres or 1 litre of grey. So this bit would be my answer. I have my first answer, it's 600 millilitres. Let's have a look at the second question. I'm going to leave my ratio like this because this is my main bit of information. How many litres of white paint is there? So I put a question mark there. If there is 1800 millilitres of black paint. Okay, so I've got 1800 millilitres of black paint. How many litres of white is there if there are 1800 millilitres of black? Okay, well I have two things. If I have something top and bottom, then I can compare them. So I need to think about my scale factor. What am I multiplying 6 by to get to 1800? Are there any numbers in here you can spot? There's an 18 here, and 18's in the 6 times table. 6 multiplies by 3 to get to 18, and 1800 is the same as 1800. So it's 300. I've had to multiply this by 300. I've had to apply the scale factor of 300 to get from there to there. So I need to do the same to every other part of my ratio. So 4 times 300, if I know that 4 times 3 is 12, then 4 times 300 is 1200. And these would total to 3000 millilitres or 3 litres. My question is, how many millilitres of white paint is there? And there it is, it's 1200. Okay, next question. A batch of grey paint contains 6 litres of white paint. How much grey paint is there? So I know that I've got 6 litres of white paint, so I can put that there. How much grey paint is there? So I need to know this. So I've got my information here. I've got 2 bits of information here that I can compare. So I need to think about what to multiply 4 by to get to 6. What am I multiplying 4 by to get to 6? Now some of you may be able to do this. You may recognise what you multiply 4 by to get to 6. If you've got it, then apply it to the rest. If you're not sure, I'm going to give you a strategy. So 4 does not fit fully into 6. It's going to be a part number. It's going to be a mixed number, a number and a fraction. But what I can do is I can find a common factor of 4 and 6. Now 4 and 6 are both even numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to halve it. I'm going to halve this to make it 2. I'm going to halve this to make it 3. 6 to 4 is the same as 3 to 2. This is a simplified version. But now that I've made it 3 to 2, it might be easier to work from this 2 and go up to 6 than it was to go from 4 to get to 6. So now I'm thinking about my 2 to my 6. What have I got to multiply 2 by to get to 6? Well, it's by 3, isn't it? So I could do the same to this. And then I could do the same to my grey. 5 times 3 is 15. And I can just double check that 9 and 6 does make 15. So if I wasn't able to go from 4 to 6, I can find a common factor and go down, or I could have even found a common multiple and gone up and then come down. But I found another number which is equivalent, and then from there it was easier to go up to this. So the question, a batch of grey paint contains 6 litres of white paint. How much grey paint is there? So this is my answer here because it's in the grey column. So in a batch of grey paint with 6 litres of white paint, there would be 15 litres of grey paint. Now if you need to pause or rewind or go back to watch this again, then do so. But for each question, you need to identify the ratio, write it out as I've done here, write in the clues you've got, and then think about scaling up or scaling down till you get the part of the question that you need. Now, if you're feeling confident, give your questions a go. If you want a bit more help, I'm going to go through the first question on your worksheet. The ratio of children to adults is 5 to 3. So I'm going to start by writing this up. Children to adults is 5 to 3. And I'm also going to write the total of my group. In a group, there's 5 children and 3 adults. I'm going to write group at the top. So in my group, the ratio is 5 to 3. Now, this doesn't mean that the group only has 8 people. It means that in your group, for every 5 children, there are 3 adults. Let's look at the first question. How many adults are there? So put a question mark under adults. In a group of 64 people. A group of 64 people, so I've got this information. I can put my 64 in the groups column. How many adults are there in a group of 64? Okay, I have my 2 things to compare. Once you've got a top and a bottom to compare, my 8 and my 64, I think about my scale factor. It's enlarged. What am I scaling up by? What am I multiplying by to get from 8 to 64? Multiplying by 8. When I know my scale factor, I apply it to all the other parts. So 5 times 8 is 40. So in a group of 64, I'd have 40 children. And 3 times 8 is 24. And I'd have 24 adults. And I'm just going to check 40 and 24 make 64. So that is correct. I'm now confident that I've got the right answer. It's asking how many adults there are. There's my adult column. I go down. So that is my answer. In a group of 64 people, there are 24 adults. Let's work through the next question. If at any time you feel you want to give it a go, pause the video. You can always come back and check once you've had a go. How many children are there? So I'm going to put a question mark under my children. How many children are there in a group of 24 people? So question mark, how many children are there in a group of 24 people? Again, I've got my clue for my group now. I've got information for the group size. So I can compare. I've got a top and bottom here. I can compare. What have I scaled up by? I've multiplied by 3, which means I multiply every other part by 3. 3 times 3 is 9. And 5 times 3 is 15. I'm going to check 15 and 19 makes 24, and it does. So I'm confident that my ratio is correct. How many children are there? I go to this part. There's 15 children in a group of 24. And finally, there are 25 children. How many people are there altogether? There are 25 children, so I have this information. Remember, each time write your information underneath the initial ratio that you're given. How many people are there altogether? So it wants to know this part. Okay, have I got 2 things I can compare? Yes, I do. I can compare my children in the original and my children here. What have I scaled up by? 5 times what makes 25? I've scaled up by 5. So I now need to apply that scale factor to every other part. Let's start here. 3 times 5 is 15. And 8 times 5 is 40. Let's check. 25 and 15 makes 40. I'm confident my ratio works. The question is saying how many people are there all together? So that is this bit. It doesn't want to know how many adults there are. It wants to know all together. So my answer is 40. Does that all make sense? Are you feeling confident to give the other questions a go by yourself? I'm going to go through another example with you. So watch along with me if you want, or pause, give it a go, and then you can listen in and pause whenever you feel confident. The ratio of brown eyes to blue eyes is 15:1. So I'm going to start by writing down my ratio of brown eyes to blue eyes, which is 15:1. And then I'm going to call the total P for people, because it's saying the questions are asking about how many people there are. So if there's 15 with brown eyes, 1 with blue eyes, that makes 16. Let's look at the first question. How many people with brown eyes are there if there are 96 people? So how many brown-eyed people if there are 96 people? So I don't have any information about blue. I want to know my information about brown, but I have information about the people. So I need to think about what I've scaled up by. How many times does 16 fit into 96? You might need to do a written division for this. If you want to do that, pause before I give you the answer. So I had to scale up by 6. So once I've got my scale factor, I apply it. So there, 1 times 6 is 6. So in a group of 96 people, there would be 6 with blue eyes. And then I have to do 15 times 6, which is 90. Again, you might need to do a written method for that, which is absolutely fine. I just want to show you the strategy and the method at this point. And 90 and 6 makes 96, so I know that this all works. Let's look at the next question. Remember to pause when you feel like you want to give something a go by yourself. How many people with blue eyes are there? So question mark under my blue eyes. In a group of 48 people. So I've got information about how many people again, but nothing about my brown eyes. So if I look down, nothing to compare, but I have something to compare here. What am I scaling up by? I'm scaling up by 3, which means I go to all the other parts. 15 times 3 is 45, and 1 times 3 is 3. 45 and 3 make 48, so that's correct. How many people with blue eyes? So it's this bit. It's 3. There are 7 people with blue eyes. Okay, so I've been told there are 7 people with blue eyes. How many people with brown eyes are there? Okay, well, I've got something to compare. I can compare this. What have I had to scale up by? It was 7. So I need to do 15 times 7. If you want to pause and do a written method to figure that out now, you can. I'm going to do this mentally. 10 times 5 is 70. 5 times 7 is 35. If I add them together, I get 105. And my answer to how many people with brown eyes is 105. Okay, give those other questions on your worksheet a go. Remember to label at the top the parts in your ratio, underneath label your ratio, write down the total because this helps you, and then in your question think about what clue you've got. Do you have this clue? Do you have this clue? Or do you have this clue? Then you compare them, think about what the scale factor is, apply the scale factor to the rest, fill the whole thing in, and then check your question. What's it asking you for? Is it asking you for this or this or this? Okay, good luck. Give that a go now. In this activity, we're thinking about applying our ratio to real things like sweets or ingredients. I'm going to work through the activity on your worksheet. So if you want to have a go independently, pause or skip this part of the video. If you want to work through with me and maybe pause when you feel confident, then you can pause at any time you feel that you're ready to have a go on your own. So in this table, my heading is telling me my ratio. For every 5 red sweets, I have 4 blue sweets, 2 yellow sweets and 3 green sweets. Okay, now in each row you're given just one clue. So in my first combination of sweets, I'm told that I have 27 green sweets. So I simply need to figure out what my scale factor is. What have I scaled up by from my 3 to my 27? Well, I multiplied by 9. So in this first row, you need to multiply all of these sweets by 9. So every one needs to be multiplied by 9. Do you want to give that a go? I'm going to fill in that row now, and for the other rows I'll help you to find the scale factor, but I will leave you to actually apply the scale factor. So just to demonstrate what we do next, for 5 red sweets multiplied by 9 would mean I have 45. My 4 blue sweets multiplied by 9 would mean I have 36. And my 2 yellow sweets multiplied by 9 would mean I have 18. So by using this first clue to find my scale factor of 9, I then applied this scale factor to all the other sweets. So for your next row, you have this information. So we can compare it to the original here. What is my scale factor if I started at 2 and ended on 24? What did I multiply by? I multiplied by 12, which means in this row, you need to multiply everything in the header, 5 red sweets, 4 blue sweets and 3 green sweets, by 12 and fill your answers in here. For the next row, I have my information about red sweets. I have 30 red sweets. What's my scale factor if I started at 5 and ended at 30? What did I multiply by? So I'm not going to give you the answer for this. I want you to figure out what your scale factor is to get from 5 to 30 and then apply that scale factor to the rest of the row. And then finally, blue sweets. I had 4, I've now got 12. What's the scale factor? What am I changing 4 by? What am I multiplying 4 by to get to 12? That's your scale factor. Once you've got that scale factor, you need to multiply it by 5 here. You need to multiply this answer by 2 and put it here, and take this answer and multiply by 3 and pop it here. And that's how you fill in your sweets activity. You're then going to do the same thing to the ingredients. Now be very careful when you look at your ingredients because you need to take note of the units of measurement as well. So just check whether you're working in millilitres or teaspoons or tablespoons. You're going to look at the clues you've got. So if you've got one clue like we have here, compare it to the original clue, find the scale factor and then apply it to everything else. Remember, your scale factor might be something like times 1.5 or times 2.5, okay? Just give it a go, try and figure out what the scale factor is and then apply it to the rest. Okay, good luck with that activity. In your final activity, we're working with a recipe that serves 2 people. So I'm going to talk through some of these questions but not necessarily answer them with you. If you feel confident, just go for it now and skip this part of the video. Otherwise, stay with me and I'm going to talk through it to give you some clues on how to attempt this. So I'm just going to highlight the serves 2 people. Okay. Question 1. How many apples are needed for a recipe that serves 1 person? So I could think about writing out my ratios like I did in the last question, like we had in the table. If I put A for apples and P for people, like that. If I need 3 apples for 2 people, how many apples would I need for 1 person? Now, if you write it like that, you can see we've got these two that we can compare. What do I need to do to this column? What's my scale factor? Now, first of all, I know I'm reducing, so I'm going to divide, not multiply. What am I dividing by? When I find my scale factor, I'm going to apply it to the apples, the 3 in my apple column, and that will give me my answer. Let's look at the next one. If 50 grams of kale leaves were used, how much water is needed? Okay, if 50 grams of kale leaves was used, how much water is needed? Well, let's take the information we've got. So I'm going to write kale. I'm going to put my dots in between now, kale to water, because I know that when I have 25 grams of kale, I'm going to write grams, I have 100 millilitres of water. So my kale ratio using this recipe is 25 grams of kale to 100 millilitres of water. So go back to my question, 50 grams of kale was used, so I've got that information. How much water? Well, I've written it out like this. I've got something to compare now. I can look at these two and I can think about my scale factor. What is the scale factor from 25 to 50? And can you apply it to the water bit? If you're starting to see how you can do these questions now, then I encourage you to try and do as much independently as you can. Okay. If 5 grams of chia seeds is used, how much lemon juice is needed? Okay, let's go to our recipe. Let's write out what we know. So I'm going to put C for chia seeds and L for lemon juice. So in my recipe, I have 10 grams of chia seeds is used when I have 30 mils of lemon juice. So my current ratio is 10 grams to 30 mil. I've got here 5 grams of chia seed. So if 5 grams are used, how much lemon juice is needed? And again, you can see I have my two comparisons. What is my scale factor? Remember, it's getting smaller, so I'm dividing by something. What is my scale factor? Can I then apply it to this side? Okay, I hope you're getting the hang of this now. Let's move on. How many mint leaves and sticks of celery are needed for a recipe that serves 18 people? Okay, so let's take our bits of information. Mint leaves, sticks of celery, I'm going to put C for celery, and I'm going to put P for people. So in my recipe, I've got 4 mint leaves, 2 sticks of celery, and 2 people. Okay, that's my ratio. If I have 4 mint leaves, I'll have 2 sticks of celery, and that will serve 2 people. That's my ratio from my recipe. How many mint leaves and sticks of celery are needed for a recipe that serves 18 people? So I need to find out my quantity of mint and my quantity of celery, but I know my quantity of people. So I have my two comparisons. Here are my comparisons. What am I scaling up by? What am I multiplying by? Whatever my scale factor is here, I will do here to find my sticks of celery, and I will apply it to the mint leaves to find out how many is needed for 18 people. So you need to write in 2 answers, how many mint leaves and how many sticks of celery. So well done, you have completed our video and the activities where we have been solving problems involving the relative sizes of 2 quantities, where missing values can be found by using integer, multiplication and division facts. When you're feeling confident with this skill, print off the past SATs questions. It is quite a common style of question to appear in the SATs papers, so there are plenty of examples for you to apply your newly learnt skills to. So print those off and give it a go, and good luck.